Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this evening for what I'm sure will be an enlightening and empowering experience for you with one of the UK's most forward-thinking GPs and doctors in the UK, Dr. Rupy Aujla. We first met Dr. Rupy a couple of years ago here at our opening gala night, but it wasn't until this time last year when we shared a stage with Rupy in Guernsey. Don't worry, Rupy, I'm not going to show the coasting videos. Along with the likes of Dr. Rogan Chatterjee and James Maskell at the Journey to 100. Yeah, come on, yeah. At the Journey to 100 TEDx style event on Blue Zones, that we really got to know Rupy and started to fully understand how his own health journey and medical training inspired him to push the conventional medical boundaries and bring his own knowledge to the public. Myself, and looking around the room, several of us here have our own health battles, and some of which we are developing an understanding of and have been empowered to manage them ourselves, and some that we are still researching into. The conventional healthcare process barely opens nature's medicine cabinet, and from personal experience, not once did my local doctor or hospital consultant advise me to avoid certain food groups, such as refined sugars or grains, or to eat an anti-inflammatory, mainly plant-based diet, all of which have played a huge role in my own recovery process. It goes without saying that other lifestyle interventions are crucial in preventing and managing certain conditions, which I'm sure Dr. Rupy will touch upon shortly. Identifying the root cause of your health issues is at the core of our ethos in our sister health clinic, Irrefutable Health, next door, and with food as medicine served in the Willow every day and this evening. The more GPs like Rupy, or practitioners, nutritional therapists, and the public that we see embracing this ethos, the better, as far as we are concerned. Okay, I'm going to go on to the book. I am so impressed with this book. In addition to flavour, using ingredients to create heart health, gut health, sugar-controlled and anti-inflammatory recipes, bringing their medicinal properties to the fore, really makes even the layman start to think about food as information and what positive impact it can have on your health. I'll be completely honest here, and I'm sure my wife will testify. You know when you buy a cookbook and you try one or two recipes and then that book gets resigned to the shelf to collect dust? Not this one. It hasn't left my side.
You just don't cook.
I just get hit around the head with it. No, I haven't put it down since December, as Rupy will also testify, because I've been hounding him on Instagram with my pathetic iPhone photos. Thank you. I'll pay you later. But to be doubly honest, I'm actually relieved to be getting a new book tonight, because mine is covered in sumac, massamam curry paste, there's a bit of Egyptian dukkha in there, and some other, amazing herbs and spices that I've never actually heard of before, let alone used. But no, Rupy, you'll be pleased to hear they are staple ingredients in our pantry. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Rupy Aujla, everybody.
Hello. I'm going to do an enlightening, empowering experience now.
I just copy and pasted that from the previous.
So my name's Rupy. I work as a general practitioner. I do a bit of emergency medicine, and I'm a firm believer in what you choose to put on your plate being one of the most important health interventions anyone can make. About 2.5 years ago, I started a passion project called The Doctor's Kitchen, where I create recipes and I bring light attention to the clinical research behind the ingredients I use in an effort to inspire everybody, including my colleagues, about the beauty of food and the medicinal effects of eating well. And what started as a passion project on YouTube and Instagram, just to influence my local patient population of maybe 100 or 150 people, has turned into something where I find myself in a position to influence health practitioners and trying to figure out how we educate the new generation of doctors to have a lifestyle medicine conversation. My journey kind of started when I first went to medical school. Actually, the reason why I went to medical school is because my mum, who's not a medic, overcame her own medical issues when she had anaphylaxis. So anaphylaxis being one of the most life-threatening form of allergy you can experience. She would have these attacks without any sort of notice whatsoever. They were idiopathic. It was quite a frightening experience for her. We always kept an EpiPen. She went to see all the best immunologists in the country, and she was essentially put on lifelong medication and told to always keep an EpiPen on her. And with the blessing of her immunologist, she went down her own lifestyle medicine path. She decided to take herself off a lot of different food groups. She essentially, from my memory, and I was only 12 at the time, was only eating brown rice and spinach for a whole year. She also started doing a lot of meditation practices, a lot of sleep hygiene, loads of other things that I couldn't quite understand as a young child. We would be having full meals, by the way. She'd be cooking for all of us, and then she'd be having separate meals. And I watched her gradually become a lot stronger in her mind, a lot more resilient in her health, and she came off all medications in about 12 to 18 months at the time. And that was my first introduction to the power of food and medicine, and also what kind of geared me to want to go to medicine myself. So I went to medical school in 2003, and I spent 6 long years learning anatomy, the biochemistry of the body. I absolutely fell in love with it, but I became very conventionally minded. I kind of forgot what actually triggered me to want to go into medicine in the first place. And it wasn't until I got ill myself, when I became a junior doctor, that I reminded myself of why I went into this field. So I started working at Basildon Hospital, which is a very busy hospital if anyone knows it. Is anyone from Essex here? No? Okay.
You can admit it.
Okay, you can admit it, yeah. One of my best friends who's here tonight actually was a junior doctor with me at Basildon Hospital, and he will testify about how busy this hospital is. I mean, you'll find yourself on the wards with a bleep, no cover or no registrar help, and just looking after sick patients all night long on your own. It's an absolutely harrowing experience, but I absolutely loved it because, you know, it's the forefront of medicine. You really feel like you're doing things, you've been chucked in the deep end. It's super, super stressful. 3 months into the job, I was on the stretch, I think it was about 11 or 12 days. It was Sunday afternoon. I was sat behind my nurses at one of the nurses' stations, writing in some notes, and my beat was going off casually. And I noticed that my heart was beating very, very fast. And it would get faster and faster to the point I thought I was going to pass out, and then it would settle, and then again the same thing would happen. It would actually take me about 5 to 10 minutes before I actually mustered the confidence, the courage to say to my boss at the time, "Do you mind feeling my pulse? I think I'm going a bit fast at the moment." And within about half an hour, I had my beep taken off me, I was put into a hospital gown, I was hooked up to a cardiac monitor, and I was parked right next to a patient I'd been seeing earlier that day. And I was in something called atrial fibrillation. So for the non-medics of you in the room, that is a cardiac condition where your heart beats very irregularly, and in my case very fast. It was going up to 200, 210 beats per minute. And I thought, I mean, I was admitted, and I wasn't put on any I was put on some antiarrhythmic medications. Thankfully, I wasn't unstable, so my heart rate wasn't going, my blood pressure wasn't plummeting. I was systemically fairly well, so I was put on some antiarrhythmic medications, and I was discharged the next day when I went out of AF. And I was hopeful that this was just going to be a one-off episode. Perhaps I'd had too much caffeine that day. Perhaps I hadn't drunk enough water. Perhaps I was stressed. But these episodes would plague me for the next year and a half, 2 to 3 times per week, and anything between 12 and 36 hours at a time. So I kind of went down a similar path to my mum. I went to see tons of different physicians, tons of different practitioners, some of the world's leading cardiologists, electrophysiology specialists, those who deal with just medications or interventions. And I had every single test, and nothing could identify a trigger. And at the end of all these investigations that were probably over a 3 or 4 month period, I was given the option of either lifelong medication or a potentially curative procedure, or it was sold to me as a curative procedure, something called an ablation, which is where a guide wire goes into the heart and you essentially laser a group of cells near the pulmonary vein that are excitable and usually the cause of atrial fibrillation. So you have a short circuiting of the heart. And I was definitely going to go for this option. I'd spoken to all my medical colleagues. It was a relatively safe procedure, apart from the side effect of potentially death and a stroke. But the chances of that were quite low, and I was a very good candidate. I didn't have a family history, I wasn't obese, I was in generally good health. The one person that told me to look at my lifestyle was actually my mum. And if I'm honest, I thought she was completely crazy. I was certainly conventionally minded in my approach. My girlfriend at the time was trying to Warfarinize me to get me prepped for the ablation procedure, which is something you need to do 2 months in advance. And with the blessing of my cardiologist, and really to appease my mum, I decided to take 6 months and just see what I could do with my lifestyle, just to show her that it's probably not going to do anything. So where did I start? I don't know where I started. At the time, you know, there's no blueprint for this. I wasn't aware of functional medicine. I certainly didn't have access to any integrated medical practitioners. But I decided to start with my diet. So out went the cereals and toast that I'd usually have for breakfast, or the soggy sandwiches in the hospital canteen that I became reliant on. And in came dark green leafy vegetables, quality fats like nuts and seeds, lots of different sorts of flavors and spices. And I should have told you earlier that my mum actually taught me how to cook before I went to medical school. She taught me one of the dishes that's actually in the book called Lemongrass Thai curry. So I was there as a 19-year-old, 18-year-old medical student with only one recipe to my name, but everyone thought I was a fantastic cook. I was using galangal and Thai baos and all these wonderful different herbs, but I learned along the way. So I applied sort of those culinary techniques that I'd kind of honed over my medical school career to healthy eating. I also focused on my sleep because I knew when I wasn't on night shifts, I needed to focus on getting some good rest time and some downtime as well. So sleep was actually integral to what I was trying to do with my lifestyle. I also started practicing meditation, something my family taught me to do when I was doing my GCSEs and I was experiencing lots of stress at the time. So I started getting into my mantras and actually making sure that I was doing at least 5 to 10 minutes, if not meditation, just deep breathing exercises with some chill out time. And I also was doing different sorts of exercises. So, as Amit will know, I was probably doing a little more weights back then, but I just started doing different things like mobility, flow, yoga, as well as endurance exercise. And over the 12 to 18 months, I was meticulously recording when I was having AF episodes, making sure I had my ECG so I could show to my cardiologist what was going on. And it was a point when I was working as a general practitioner in Brighton that I realised I hadn't had an episode for about 3 months, and then that went to 5 months, and then that went to 12 months. And then I remember having a conversation with my cardiologist, and I remember saying to him, I think this is gone. And he was like, there's no way it's gone. It's probably gone into something called quiescence, which is where it just naturally calms down. It'll probably come back at some point in the future. And if you do want to have the ablation then that's something we can consider, but you really do need to do these medications. I haven't had an AF episode for about 5 or 6 years now. And what it showed me is that my anecdotal case was that the body has an incredible ability for it to self-heal. Now that sounds very out there and very alternative, but by feeding it and putting it in the right environment, your body is capable of some incredible things. And during this whole time, I started doing a lot more research, looking at nutrition a lot more, looking at the benefits of things like yoga and vagal nerve stimulation, all these different things. And this whole world sort of revolved around me, sort of opened up around me. And it was quite exciting as a young medic to find out about all this information. It was also quite frustrating that in 6 years of my medical career, I hadn't come across this, and none of my senior lecturers had told me about this either. So whilst I was working as a general practitioner, I started having more open, honest conversations with my patients about how they could eat to improve arthritis or their diabetes, or try and regulate their sugar levels better. You're right. They're okay. And what I realised is that I was having longer and longer consultations where I was having longer and longer consultations where I was trying to write down recipes, give them so much advice in a 10-minute model. It just wasn't working at the time. I remember vividly with my first patient, and he was a bit overweight, he had arthritis, and he wanted some advice about how to improve his weight and all the other things. And so I wrote him like a full list of things that I wanted him to do. Some oats in the morning, mix it up with nuts and seeds, have a little bit of peanut butter, try and go easy on these sorts of refined carbohydrates. And then he turned to leave, and he was leaving the door, and he said, just one more thing, doctor, how do you make oats? And then it kind of dawned on me that a lot of people don't know the basics of cooking. We've actually lost this from generation to generation. The family unit, which usually is what we rely on to pass on new information, particularly things like life skills like cooking, has kind of been lost. And so I sat him back down and obviously taught him how to make oats. But then I realised that there's something I need to do that's going to solve the problem of me having longer and longer consultation methods. And so the idea of the doctor's kitchen actually came about 6 or 7 years ago, but I didn't actually muster the confidence to talk about food and medicine behind a camera for fear of backlash against my colleagues. And it was only until I qualified as a general practitioner, I went to Australia. I was doing emergency medicine there, and I mustered the confidence to get behind a camera and then start it. And from then it's really snowballed. And what I've found along the way is that there are a lot more medics who, now that a lot more people are talking about it, are more confident to come out of their shell, and I absolutely welcome them. We actually have a few GPs that have chatted to me in the interim before this, that are talking about their own social media accounts or doing more talks or actually educating their colleagues, because there is a lot of interest, and we actually have to ride the public wave of interest that is driving a lifestyle medicine culture. So the things that I always talk about from a food perspective is that, yes, diet is a very, very good way of starting your lifestyle change, but actually it's not the only thing. It's actually how your food and your diet feeds a conversation into sleep hygiene and movement and your general environment, things that are non-tangible but have just as much importance as nutrition. But as we're talking about food, I've done a podcast as a series 1 called the Doctor's Kitchen Podcast, and I talk about all the different principles of healthy eating that I think are really, really good starting points for people. There's 5 or 6 things that I generally tend to talk about. We'll talk about them in turn. So eating whole, I think, is a very easy concept for a lot of people to understand. So when I talk about eating whole, I'm talking about the sort of spectrum between your raw whole food and your ultra-processed food. So really, we want to be nudging people away from the processed food towards the whole food. And that's not to say that we only eat raw, unprocessed food in its entirety, because by virtue of chewing or even steaming or lightly cooking, we are processing a food. So it's really just nudging people away from the process element. And actually, sometimes when we process foods or we steam them, we actually increase the bioavailability of those phytonutrients, which are plant chemicals found in all different sorts of plants, that actually confer benefits to you, the human host. So it's actually about educating people to eat more things like sweet potato with the skins on, for example, or properly preparing your beans and legumes so you actually reduce the anti-nutrient or phyto levels to actually have it that's actually going to be less irritating and damaging to your gastric lining. So educating people on eating whole is certainly the way to go. The other thing, and you'll probably notice this if you follow me on social media, is a plant-focused lifestyle is probably the best evidence base for it. So people talk about the Mediterranean diet, the Asian diets, or the Mediterranean diet. There's a paper called the Mediterranean diet, which I think is fantastic, because they're basically combining all the different elements of what makes Japanese and Chinese food so healthy, as well as the Mediterranean style. And the similarity is that, and even Paleolithic diets as well, the similarity is that they focus on the vegetables, the dark green leafy greens, the different sorts of colours that you have in your diet. This is what all these diets have in common. So when you have a plant-focused lifestyle, it's generally a good starting point for most people. I also talked about colours. Now, colours are literally the easiest way to guarantee that you're getting all the different micronutrients from your plate. Micronutrients being, yes, vitamins and minerals, of which many are essential, but also phytonutrients, of which I think there are over 8,000 different types that have been discovered that confer so many health benefits to you. And you'll hear a lot of things like apple having quercetin, or onions, allicin, and different things that you find in garlic. But really, it's about eating whole, because those different phytochemicals are perfectly arranged in natural alignment for our bodies to absorb them and digest them as well. So getting a different spectrum of colours in your diet is so easy for a lot of patients. They just get it. They understand. You focus in the grocery aisle, you get lots of different colours, and that's what you have for your week as well. And the other thing is fibre. I think most people know in this room about gut health and the importance of your microbiome, which is the population of microbes that live in and around your body, including fungi, viruses, largely bacteria, and largely concentrated in your gut. That is responsible for not only digesting food, but also releasing the minerals and different vitamins that you have from your colourful plates, as well as neurotransmitters being released, as well as reducing inflammation, as well as improving your sugar control as well. And by focusing on plant-focused proteins, things like beans, legumes, and nuts and seeds, you're not only getting protein, you're getting fibre that's going to be increasing or nurturing that population of microbes that live in your gut as well. And that's the easiest way to positively impact your microbiome. It doesn't necessarily, and this is something that I talk to a lot of my NHS patients about, because they go for the supplements and they go for the probiotics before getting the basics right. And the basics are simple things like fibre. Those are the core features of what I think is a healthy diet. And if you have those principles rather than rules, it's easy for people to take that when they go and navigate the supermarkets for themselves. So I alluded to a little bit earlier about what I think the future of medicine is going to be like. It's going to be an empowered medical generation that is interested in food and lifestyle and is equipped to have the conversations about nutrition and lifestyle. Not so we can replace nutritional therapists, nutritionists, or dietitians. It's so we can actually facilitate the conversation between them and use them appropriately as well, because right now we don't have that conversation. So one of the things I'm super passionate about is something called colouring medicine, which is something that isn't revolutionary. It's not something that actually I started. It started in America. There's been papers dated back towards 2009, 2010, talking about how we need to educate our medical students, not only in clinical nutrition, but also how to cook as well. It's sort of like having an anatomy class without seeing a cadaver. That's the analogy I like to use. So you can either learn anatomy by reading all the medical textbooks like Gray's Anatomy, etc., or you can read the textbook and you can go into the dissection room and actually see the fibres and see what a body looks like when you're actually cutting through it. Sorry to talk about this before dinner. But it's literally the same thing. So there's a difference between learning about nutrition from books and actually understanding the process of food, understanding the health promoting benefits of doing exactly what we're doing this evening, sitting around a table, enjoying food in each other's company, and actually enlightening different conversations as well. And so colouring medicine is something that started in Tulane Medical School in New Orleans. They started teaching their medical students initially on an elective basis, so it was optional, and now it's compulsory as part of their medical education. So all medical students will learn these core 8 modules of how to cook and the basis of things like fats, protein diets, as well as vegetarian, all the different myths are out there as well. So I approached Dr. Tim Harlan about a year and a half ago and I said, we don't have this in the UK, we're massively behind. Would you be interested in me trying to champion this and pioneer this in the UK? And they sort of jumped at the chance. Now, for them, they license the course only to educational institutions. So they're actually in 35 different American medical schools as of right now, growing. I'm not an educational institution, but I gave them the option of licensing the course to me with the premise that I would get it accredited by the Royal College of GPs. So it's properly certified as a course, which I did about 12 months ago. And since then, we've done 2 pilot modules with Westminster Kingsway, which is one of the best culinary schools in Europe. Gordon Ramsay gets his chefs from there, Jason Atherton, etc. Jamie's done loads of modules there. And we've taught a total of 25 medical doctors who are qualified, not only GPs, but also anaesthetists, biochemical consultant we had a couple of weeks ago, the last one, and with a view to elevating their knowledge of clinical nutrition so it changes their clinical practice. Next month, for the first time in the UK, I'm going to Bristol, where we're actually going to be delivering culinary medicine to medical students for the first time. It's never ever happened before. So it's a really exciting time for culinary medicine, and I think really that is going to be the key to lifestyle change and actually changing those conversations we have in all clinical scenarios, whether it be in general practice, whether it be in hospital, whether it be in the community. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. I've probably sparked a lot of questions in a lot of people's minds, but I think we're going to do Q&A later, you said?
Yeah, we'll do that over dessert maybe, and maybe a little bit afterwards as well.
Sure. Yeah. So to sum up, the Doctor's Kitchen is really a portal for me to teach people to lead happier, healthier lives, and colouring medicine, I think, is the missing key to actually exciting the rest of the medical profession and inviting them into this conversation that will facilitate utilising all the different practitioners that we have, so nutritional therapists, dietitians, and registered nutritionists as well. Thanks a lot for listening.